Imagine being the invisible one in the room, the man who pushes the mop, empties the bins, and disappears before anyone remembers his face. That was Marcus. Every night he walked through the marble floors of a skyscraper that wasn't built for him. To the billionaires, he was just the janitor. But one night, when the richest man in the building, a CEO feared by thousands, started dying right in front of everyone, the only person who noticed was Marcus. And what he did next didn't just save a life, it shattered everything. People thought they knew about power, money, and respect. This is the story of the black janitor who saved a millionaire CEO's life. Every evening, just as the last clusters of sharp-dressed executives hurried down to their Blacktown cars, Marcus walked through the lobby of Hall & Cross Enterprises with his cleaning cart. They rushed past him, Armani suits, leather briefcases, expensive perfumes, and never once looked him in the eye. He had worked there for 7 years, but to most of them, he was as much a fixture of the building as the vending machines or the revolving doors. "Evening, Marcus?" the security guard Joe would sometimes nod. That was about the only acknowledgement Marcus ever got. And yet, while the world ignored him, Marcus saw everything. He noticed the coffee cups left behind in conference rooms after a heated meeting. He noticed when the receptionist had been crying in the bathroom but came back out with her makeup fixed. He noticed how every Friday night the CEO's office light stayed on long after everyone else had gone. But the thing Marcus noticed most was how people's bodies betrayed the truths they were trying to hide. That awareness didn't come from the job. It came from tragedy. Years ago, Marcus's wife, Lillian, had passed away. She'd been young, too young, only in her 40s, but her heart had given out. Marcus had been the one who saw the signs first, the fatigue, the dizzy spells, the way her lips sometimes looked blue. The doctors brushed it off. "Stress," they said, "maybe low iron." By the time anyone took it seriously, it was too late. Since then, Marcus had trained himself to notice details most people missed. He couldn't save Lillian, but maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else. And that's why, on a chilly November night, as he pushed his cart past the glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, Marcus froze. Inside, sitting alone at the head of the massive mahogany table, was Richard Hall, the billionaire CEO of the company. His tie was loosened, his face pale. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, but his other hand was trembling against his chest. Marcus hesitated. He knew Richard's reputation: ruthless, cold, the kind of man who fired people with a single line, "You're replaceable." Most employees spoke his name in whispers, as if saying it too loud might get them in trouble. But what Marcus saw wasn't power, it was weakness. Richard's lips were faintly purple, his breathing shallow. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Though the room was cool, Marcus's heart skipped. He had seen this before. He wanted to step inside to say something. But what would he say? "Excuse me, sir. I think you might be dying." He was a janitor. Nobody listened to janitors. So Marcus swallowed his words, nodded politely when Richard's eyes briefly flicked toward him and moved on. But that image, the trembling hand, the shallow breath, stayed with him all night. By 2 a.m., when Marcus finally locked up his cart and headed down the service elevator, he couldn't shake the thought, "Something's wrong with that man, and if nobody sees it, it's going to end badly." As he stepped out into the empty streets of New York, Marcus pulled his coat tighter against the wind. Above him, the skyscraper glowed against the night sky, the top-floor office still lit. Richard Hall was up there, alone. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt the same gnawing dread he had felt when Lillian's symptoms were ignored. He whispered to himself as he walked toward the subway station, "Don't let me be too late this time." The next morning, Marcus returned to Hall & Cross Enterprises with a strange weight in his chest. The city was alive again. Horns blaring, commuters rushing, the endless blur of Manhattan. But inside the skyscraper, the atmosphere was always the same, polished, cold, efficient. Richard Hall's empire. Richard wasn't just a CEO, he was a legend and a nightmare. He had built Hall and Cross from nothing, starting as a scrappy law firm before transforming it into a corporate giant that swallowed up competitors like a shark devouring minnows. He had the kind of presence that made boardrooms fall silent when he entered. His employees called him the Iceman because Richard didn't smile, he didn't joke, and he didn't forgive. "Hall doesn't run a company," Marcus once overheard a junior executive whisper near the elevators. "He runs a kingdom." And kingdoms had kings who ruled with fear. That morning, as Marcus pushed his mop bucket across the gleaming lobby, he saw the tension in everyone's faces. Assistants speed-walked with clipboards. Executives clutched coffee cups like shields. Every soul in the building seemed to orbit around the invisible gravity of one man, Richard Hall. But what none of them knew, Marcus thought grimly, was how close their king had been to collapsing the night before. He couldn't shake the memory of Richard's trembling hand, his shallow breaths, that flash of purple on his lips. It was the same look Lillian had before the end. Marcus knew he had to do something. But what? Who would believe him? He was the janitor. Still, he tried. When he passed the security desk, Joe leaned on the counter with his usual grin. "Morning, Marcus. Another day, another dollar, huh?" Marcus hesitated. "Hey, Joe, you ever notice Mr. Hall? I mean, does he look all right to you?" Joe chuckled, shaking his head. "Hall? The guy's a machine. Doesn't even take vacations. He'll outlive all of us." "But I mean it," Marcus pressed. "Last night, he looked off." Joe gave him a strange look, like Marcus had just told him ghosts lived in the break room. Then he lowered his voice. "Look, brother, don't stick your nose in Hall's business. Guys like him, they don't want anyone seeing weakness, especially not from the janitor." The words stung, but Marcus nodded. Joe was right. He had no place meddling in the affairs of a billionaire. And yet, his gut told him otherwise. That afternoon, Richard Hall swept through the lobby on his way to a black SUV waiting outside. Two assistants trailed him, talking fast, but Richard wasn't listening. He walked like a man used to owning the world, but Marcus noticed it again. The slight stiffness in his gait, the way his hand brushed against his chest when he thought nobody was looking. A quick grimace, gone in an instant. Marcus froze, mop in hand. He wasn't imagining this. Richard Hall was sick, and nobody else could see it. That night, Marcus lingered longer than usual. The building emptied out, floor by floor, until only the hum of the cleaning machines echoed through the hallways. On the 42nd floor, the CEO's office light was still on. Marcus stood in the corridor, staring at that door. He could walk in. He could say something. He could tell Richard what he saw. But then what? Richard Hall wasn't the kind of man who listened to janitors. In fact, Marcus could already hear the sharp reply in his head. "Stick to your mop, Daniels." And yet, doing nothing felt worse. Finally, Marcus whispered to himself, "Lillian, what would you want me to do?" With a shaky breath, he pushed open the heavy glass door. The office smelled of expensive leather and whiskey. Richard sat at his desk, hunched over a stack of papers. He didn't look up at first. "What is it?" Richard's voice was deep, irritated. Marcus swallowed. His hands gripped the mop handle tight. "Sir, I noticed last night, and again today. You don't look well." Richard finally lifted his gaze. His eyes were cold as ice, the kind of stare that could make executives crumble. "Excuse me?" Marcus's throat went dry. "I mean, no disrespect, sir, but I've seen these things before. The way you breathe, Your color. Your hand." He gestured nervously. "It might be serious. Maybe your heart—" "Enough." Richard's voice cracked like a whip. The room went silent. Richard stood, his expression stone. "You clean floors, Daniels. That's all. You don't diagnose me. You don't tell me what I need. Do your job and get out." Marcus froze. His face burned with humiliation. His chest ached with the weight of being dismissed, not just by a CEO, but by a man whose life might be slipping away. "Yes, sir," Marcus whispered. He turned, pushing his mop bucket out the door. His hands shook with anger and grief. But as the elevator doors closed behind him, Marcus thought of Lillian again. And he knew he wasn't done. Not yet. The city was restless that night, rain tapping against the towering glass of Hall and Cross. Marcus had left the building earlier than usual, but his mind wasn't quiet. Richard Hall's voice still rang in his ears. "You clean floors, Daniels. That's all." But the way Richard had clutched his chest, the sharp flash of pain behind those cold eyes, Marcus knew it wasn't just stress. It was something darker, something ticking inside the man like a time bomb. By dawn, Marcus made his decision. He wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The next evening, the company was buzzing. A high-profile investors' dinner was being held in the executive dining hall. Crystal chandeliers glowing, champagne flutes clinking, the elite of New York, gathered under one roof. Marcus had been asked to help set up before retreating to his usual cleaning rounds. From the corner of the room, he watched as Richard Hall entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit. His presence commanded instant silence. "Ladies and